All right, so today what I want to just talk about a little bit is citizen science as a tool, and then I'll get into the SciFish platform. I wasn't sure how familiar everyone was with citizen science, so I just wanted to touch on that a little bit today and to get started. So citizen science is, it really depends a little bit on where you are and what your perspective is. So as you can see in the little cartoon, if we're all blindfolded and we are in different parts of the elephant, we might have different perspectives on what it is that we're examining here. No one here has actually come up with elephant though. Um, so there are a lot of different spectrums of citizen science, and different folks, if you talk to different people, you will get different responses as to what citizen science is, but it really can be a lot of different things, starting with contributory science. So that has, very high data precision and accuracy. This is for large scale monitoring, a lot of increased content knowledge. And this is really, that's more controlled by the scientists. And then there's collaborative efforts, and those are the projects that are designed more together. They really leverage a lot more of the local knowledge, and that's really a necessary part of those kinds of projects. It really does take a lot of stakeholder engagement, and it utilizes the skills and the capacity and the knowledge of them. And I think those are great projects because um, there's really a lot of stewardship behavior that gets to be part of that. And then the last one really is the most opportunity for non-scientists, so to speak, to get involved, and that's the co-created. So there's a really high potential to enhance stakeholder capacity and knowledge, and there is, you can in some cases you won't have quite as high of an expectation of data precision and accuracy, um, but it can really go a long way toward um, supporting social change. So this is really something where you work together on all aspects of the project, from project idea all the way through creation, um, or through completion. So citizen science has really become um, just something that if you could probably 10 or 15 years ago not even really heard too much about citizen science. You may have heard of a project here or there, but it really has become, it's really taken off as a discipline. There's a huge number of publications that have come out in the last decade. There's also a crowdsourcing and citizen science act that came out in 2016. And NOAA actually named citizen science a focus area for their science and technology in January of 2020. And then they released a sit-size strategy and action plan in 2021 and 2023. So it's really exciting in recent years to have more interest growing in this um, field. So citizen science can really be a powerful tool, but one of the things that we want to always remember is that it is a tool, and it's one of the tools in your data collection toolkit. And so the question is it the right tool for your data needs and circumstances? And so that's something that we've been talking a lot about in our region. This is from a paper from um, Pocock et al. We got this from Rick Bonney, who we work with a lot on our side. Um, this is really something that, like, you really need to think about, is my project appropriate for citizen science? So are there good reasons to for people to participate? Are there plenty of resources available? Is the engagement important? Because if there's no reason for people to participate, and it doesn't really matter if they're part of the project, then it may not be the best way to approach your project. And so this is one of those things that I want you guys to kind of keep in mind as we move forward. So it really is, this idea of what is the right approach for your project. So to get into a little bit about the SciFish platform, this was developed, originally there was a project at the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council called Release, and then North Carolina put out a project called Catch You Later. And the developer who built both of those applications essentially built the second North Carolina project as a copy of the first one. And those are both partners of ACCSP, and they came to ACCSP the next year and said, you know what? We have two apps and they're almost identical. There's got to be a better way than having for everybody to have to build their own. And then the data comes in all these different ways and it's not standardized. And so they talked to us and we put together a proposal. And that was how the idea of SciFish was born. And so this is really sort of how it came about 4 years ago now. Because like I said, we went live earlier this year. So here's our introduction to SciFish. There's this growing interest in using the citizen science, as I mentioned, and it really is a powerful tool. So our vision was to create a mobile application that encourages and supports the capture of the data on the Atlantic coast. But we wanted to create a menu-driven project builder so that standalone apps wouldn't need to be built, and that the data could be standardized and centralized in a single database. So this was sort of what we wanted to achieve. So the drivers behind this were, one, to reduce the costs needed to develop individual applications. A large chunk of the funds that can go into a lot of these projects is the development of the application. Also, you can reduce the time to create the applications from the ground up. When you're trying to get a project off the ground, developing the application can really kind of put a delay in your timeline. And then finally, again, based on the introduction, as you guys all know, we are big on the data standards, and so increasing consistency in the data fields and the structures was really important from the commission standpoint. So the approach we took was to focus on data collection for marine and diadromous fisheries along the Atlantic coast, and we want to work on filling data gaps or data deficiencies and addressing identified research needs. So I'll talk a little bit in a minute about how we choose which projects are able to use the platform. And for us, it's really important that the projects are extremely well thought out. And because one of the downfalls to citizen science can be that applications can get built and the stakeholders that are involved are told, oh yeah, no, we're going to use your data. This is going to be great. And then people contribute their data and then the rug gets pulled out from under them because the project didn't get well thought out. The data that are being produced are not able to be used by management or science because of the way that it's been collected. And then there's a lot of disenfranchisement that can happen that way. And we want to make sure that we prevent that kind of thing because we want to have solid projects where people really feel like they're contributing and they're addressing needs that are really out there. So the third item here is to really just use intentional design and clearly articulate how the collected data are going to be used in management in our stock assessments. And then next is to standardize the data collection of citizen science data. Again, this is really important because discards is a huge part of this, and if there are discards in multiple projects that are for the same species, they can potentially be combined when they're used in an assessment for mortality and other reasons. And then lastly was just to provide a single platform for multiple data collection projects. So how does it work? ACCSP, which is the equivalent of the Fisheries Information Network, so very similar to RecFin, PacFin on the Pacific coast. We administer the app program, and we've put together a oversight committee, and they're called the SciFish Advisory Panel, or the SAP. We self-named ourselves the SAP, so we're left with it, but we're going to go with it. So the SciFish Advisory Panel right now, these are the members. What you can see is we actually have folks from a number of different places. So we have Maryland in the Mid-Atlantic, and we also have um, folks in Georgia and North Carolina in the South Atlantic. We have Rhode Island in the Northeast. We also have folks that are from NOAA fisheries in different regions as well. And then we also have myself from ACCSP. So the way that this works is we have a multi-step application process. You have to start with the pre-application. Once you've gone through the pre-application, we'll say, yes, this looks like a great project. Please go ahead and put in a full application. The reason that we wanted to have 2 steps is that we didn't want people to go through the full, we didn't want to have them have the burden of doing a full application if we could tell right away that they hadn't really thought out their project yet and it wasn't going to pass. So we wanted to just do a very short pre-application where we say, hey, what are you planning on doing? And then we can be like, we don't really know what gap you're filling, or have you talked to the folks who are going to use the data? And that way they've really thought out that project and they can fill out the full application and really have a chance of being accepted. So on an application, these are some of the big things that we're looking for. How are the data going to be used? What's your data management plan? What does your QA/QC look like? What's your volunteer training plan? If you're going to have folks sending in data, then there needs to be training. Retention and recruitment is a huge part of these projects. What's your communication plan? How are you going to keep people involved? What's the budget that you have for your project? Because a lot of folks think that, well, as long as the app is free, we're not going to need any money. That's not true. You're going to need money for other things, even things just as minor as like, hey, we give away hats for these certain things, or we participate in tournaments and there's prizes. So a lot of these projects need those kinds of incentives. And then what's the risk associated with this? So that's the things that we're looking for in the full application. And when we say things like volunteer training plan or communication plan, we're actually expecting like 500 words on that, or you're allowed to update or upload a document. So that's one of the reasons that we don't want to get people into that full application before we've had a chance to say, yeah, you're on the right track, because it is a pretty lengthy application. So how does SciFish get used? SciFish is essentially an umbrella, and what lives under it right now, we have Catch You Later and Release, and we also have a couple new projects that are coming on. So all of these projects essentially live under this SciFish umbrella. The other component is the SciFish API. So if you want to use the SciFish mobile application, you can use that application. You can use our project builder. You build your project and the data come into our system. They live in the database. They're standardized, and you don't have to invest in building your application. We do have some projects where the application has been built. It's been in use for maybe a few years. But what they would really like to do is say, hey, we can translate our data so that it is standardized and it's available centrally. And what we can do is we can just send you that data. And so that's where the API comes in. So we are also accepting projects where we don't want people to have to switch applications, because you will lose your participants if you try to make them switch applications. The application's already been built, that investment's been done. So we want to keep using those applications, but we want to put those data in the standardized place. So those are sort of the 2 approaches that we have right now for using the SciFish program. You can live under the SciFish projects umbrella and use the app, or you can also just use the API and send in the data from your existing application. So next, I just want to talk a little bit about the SciFish platform and how it works. I've mentioned a project builder and a mobile application. So on the left-hand side of your screen is the project builder. I did send a PDF of this that I believe that can be distributed on your end. I can also share our website with you guys. It's also at the end of this presentation. And there is a video that walks through a lot of what I'm walking through, so you can feel free to watch that video if you want to. So the project builder is on the left-hand side. This is what the administrator or the project PI would be using to build the application. And then the SciFish mobile app, this is the phone. This shows you what a person will look, who is an end user, will see on their phone when they're working to submit data to your project. So you can see here, this is just, SciFish sign in, you put in your password, name and password. So this is how we build a SciFish project. It's actually really kind of incredible. Once you're familiar with this interface, from scratch to I pushed something out, most of us who have been working with this can basically go from nothing to an app in SciFish that is viable in under 10 minutes. So I just wanted to walk through a few of the screenshots to show you how this works. And again, you can watch the full video to see all of this. So there are a couple of sections that I wanted to show you. The first here is on the left-hand side, you can see this is the project builder. So on our screen right here, you can see your project builder. This is where the admin's building what they want. And then on the right-hand side, this is the screenshot of the phone. So you can actually see both at the same time. So what you can see right now is SAFMC release. This is an existing project. This is what was on the phone at the moment. On the left-hand side, what we want to do is just look at a couple of the sections here. So we have home, and this is the command buttons that appear at the top and the bottom of the home page. And then there's also records, and this is where you can define the data fields for each record and the command buttons to display to the user. And then you have your about page, and this is just where you can write custom text to describe your project. And then the navigation menu, this is where you can configure your social media links. So if you have social media accounts that are linked to your project, you can put those in there. And then the last one here is branding, and this is just so that you can give your project a unique look. So as a user comes in, they're going to log into the SciFish application, but as soon as they log in, their account is going to recognize that they're part of your project, and your project is what's going to show up, and the colors that are shown there are customized by you for your project, so it has a look and a feel that's unique to your project. So first, let's go ahead and check out the records field. We've been talking about standardization. So what you can see here is this is where we're asking what species. You can ask, say, it is required. If it's required, will I allow no response? Do I want to default this to the previous response that person entered in? You can have your own help message. You can add help image. But then over here, what you're doing is you're actually choosing species from a list. And this is where we get back to those standards, because these are part of the ACCSP standards. So when you choose either a species or a gear or an area, you're choosing those from the list of ACCSP standards. So now the names and the codes that are being used are all standardized across all of the projects. All right, so the next thing is we're going to go back out to that front page, and I want to just choose branding to kind of show you what this looks like. Admittedly, the person that made this made this video did potentially go to the Barbie movie the day before she made this video. And so the project here is called It's a Fluke, and she used the Barbie theme. On the bright side, we figured this is a theme that's unlikely to be used by any of the other projects, so it does have a uniqueness. What you can see here is there's a lot of different options. Background, on the background, primary, dark and light, error message colors. So you really can make this page look very unique for your project. So once you've chosen all of your options, you go back out to the front here, and you're going to use this button in the up top in the right here, and this just says publish. When you hit publish, you actually have a couple of channels that you can publish to. Here we're going to be using the developer one. This is just where I can personally test it. The other options here are you can have alpha or beta testing, and this is where you would test it with like very early testers in alpha, or like, okay, I've got a few more testers, we're almost ready to go live, it's in beta. And then you could do it for general availability. That just means you're putting it out there for the public. Anybody with account that's associated with that project is going to see that new version at this point. If you choose developer, alpha, or beta, you're going to get this 6-digit number because it's just for testers. So once you do that, you're going to go ahead and hit OK. And you're going to want to write down that 6-digit number or memorize it if that's your bag. And then you're going to go over to the phone, and from the hamburger menu up there, you're going to choose Access Preview Project, and you're going to put that 6-digit number in there, and then you're going to hit OK, and there's your new project. So that's how easy it is to build a new project and say, hey, these are the questions I want to ask people. These are the colors I want to use, yada, yada, yada. And at the end, you're ready and you can go. So just some of the key takeaways from the presentation is the focus here is really on supporting citizen science projects. One of our major goals is we want to standardize the collection of citizen science data so that it's available to be aggregated and also readily available for science and management. We want to focus on intentionally designed projects that fill existing data gaps so that those data are actually being used by science and management and we can maintain stakeholder engagement. Just a reminder that project development is free, but it does use ACCSP resources. So it is just something to keep in mind on our coast that, you know, it's free, but there is an investment that's being made by the partners here. And then the last item is really just the SciFish advisory panel, because those are a group of folks that put a lot of time into working with people who are developing projects and dedicating their time to making sure that we're updating our standards and getting the right kinds of projects into our application. So that's the presentation. I hope I have time for questions. I think I left myself enough time for questions.
Yeah, we have time for questions. Thank you, Julie. That was really great overview. Cool. And I'm hoping I'm getting more of the freshwater people excited about potentially using this application. Yeah. Any question for Julie?
Yeah, I have just a very general question about how many projects do you think are currently in the app?
Right now, we have 4 projects that are in development. We have the 2 that we started with. We have 4 projects that are in development that will probably be out at the beginning of next year at the latest. And we have, in the last week, I've talked to 3 other groups that are interested in applying. It depends on whether they get the funding or not to do the rest of their project. Right now, we know of at least 6 other groups that are interested. They just haven't defined their project well enough yet. They know they need to do a little bit more project development before they get involved in the app portion of it. So, like I said, it came out in May of this year. So it's really only been out for about 6 months, and it started out with 2 projects. So growth is happening pretty quickly.
Mike, and then Ian.
So not a question, I just wanted to say, this looks like a better, more developed version of something that we did for the emerging technologies things many years ago when phones and tablets as potential data entry devices came out. And we did something similar, and Greg found some company and he set up these web services and everything. It looks like a lot like this. It worked really well. And like Julie said, developing applications was pretty darn easy and quick. And, you know, so he set up a data, Greg set up the data transfer. So, you know, take it out in field, you come back as soon as you hit a Wi-Fi spot, the data go in, it went to that company, it came to StreamNet, the data were there, we sent it back. It worked really good. So, and this looks like a better version of what we tried all those years ago. So really cool.
Awesome. So if you remember that, I remember that, and you're hankering for more, this could be a lot faster too, to start with this. Go ahead, Ian.
And you know, doing data entry on these things is not efficient, right? So you have to think of the type of data that you're asking people for. But this is, citizen science. You're not asking for efficient data input. So.
Has there been development or use of a catch per unit effort component to this reporting platform? And if so, have you calibrated that with any additional surveys, and how's it worked?
No, most of the citizen science projects don't tend to focus on catch per unit effort simply because of the variable nature of the data. It's voluntary. It's very difficult to get. You don't get a very good random sample. There's a lot of bias in the sample data, and there's no validation for those data. So it becomes really difficult to use it for that at this point. There are no SciFish projects that are working with that right now. The major focus that we've seen with ours is discards and discard mortality. And we've had focus on HMS is specifically interested in shark predation on catches. So those are the things that we're looking at. Most of the projects, the goal is really, we did a workshop. The goal of these is really in citizen science to keep it as streamlined as possible. So there's always that idea of like, oh, if we could have the weather, if I knew the depth, if I knew the this, and that's great. But at that point, you're asking people like 15 questions. We really want to keep it down to 5. Like, I caught this fish, I hooked it here, I put it back in the water. Did you use a descending device? Yes, I did. Was it bitten by a shark? No, it wasn't. Really sort of very simple one-click kind of answers. The one thing that we do allow that folks have taken advantage of is you can take a picture of the fish and upload that with the record. And that's helped a lot. There's a lot of technologies that we're trying to look into for fish length, fish ID, but those are difficult things you usually need a library, and we found that taking pictures of fish actually on the boat can be really tricky. Citizen scientists struggle with that, using the phone while the boat is moving, and they want to get that fish back in the water, especially with some of the projects we have. Some of these fishes are deep water, and so it's important not to keep them out very long.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I mean, I totally understand all those things. I just wonder, in a kind of daydreaming sense, I guess for now, whether if there's a way to log in and log out, put a timestamp on the beginning and end of data collection, then that could provide, catch per unit effort could provide like an early indicator of proxy for abundance in data limited fisheries.
eBird,
he needs to try that.
yeah, eBird has a survey tool, Julie, if you ever use eBird, where
Yep.
you like click it and then you're supposed to record your birds as you go and then turn it off kind of thing. So yeah. I mean,
But if we successfully bring it over, and you can.
Well, Oregon
highlight it
has
too.
tried the MyCatch, which seems like a similar app to this.
Yeah, NOAA, when Melissa Monk from NOAA was looking into an app, for some reason, this one came across more potential than the one you just mentioned.
Yep. We do have a trip start time and a trip end time, and those can be picked up from your phone. Your phone will pick up the time of your phone and enter those things. We just don't have anyone leveraging it that way yet, because most of the folks that are doing our projects, well, all of them they're focused on the discards, and they're not necessarily asking. In a lot of these fisheries that are being executed, in some cases they're catching 20, 30 fish, and they're saying, hey, tell us about the first 5 or 10, because it becomes a burden on folks. But the data fields for start and end time are there. So if you have the right kind of fishery and the right kind of user, it's definitely something that could be done.
very cool. Any other questions for Julie, who's graciously staying late this evening, or maybe joining us from home on the East Coast, Eastern time? All right. Well, I want to thank Julie for
Yeah.
joining us and Nancy for bringing her
Yeah.
to us. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it was great to see everybody. And if
More to
anybody
come.
has any questions, just send me an email.
Do that. We'll include that in the notes.
Thanks, Julie.
Have a great
Thanks.
rest.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
TIS or?
Yes, we're going to circle back to ETIS. Sam is going to lead us through an update on that.
Okay, we're just pulling it up. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick update on this collaborative project that we have been doing every other year for, I don't know, 14 years, forever. And 2 years ago or so, we did the hybrid in-person conference in Hood River, which was, you can see in the picture there, a pretty big success, even kind of during COVID times. We did get a lot of people even overseas coming. And this year we alternate every other year, and it's going to be completely virtual this year. But still, we've collected our presenters, and I just wanted to shout out our planning committee real quick. It is a very collaborative group. We from a lot of different agencies, all part of PNAMP, and we're sponsored. It's co-sponsored by StreamNet and Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission and BPA, and so yeah, we're excited to move forward. And if you go to the next slide. We've been working on putting together this webinar series that's going to start in January 2025, January 8th, I believe. And we've selected our presenters. I will throw the program in the chat here in a second. But we have our presenters and we have our abstracts from all of our presenters, including Jeremy Five Crows, who was just talking here. And then we've secured the format of this webinar series is it'll be every Wednesday starting January 8th from 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific time. And it's 2-hour sessions. And for most of those sessions, we have 3 different presentations that are going to be about a half an hour long. One of the sessions, we have 4 presentations, and those are going to be 25-minute presentations, just with a little less time for question and answer. But the various sessions are modeling and analysis, artificial intelligence and machine learning, data QA/QC, a genetic session, and a remote sensing session. And then recently, if you guys received the PNAMP newsletter, we had our first announcement for this webinar series go out, which also includes the program. And thanks for Meg for just posting the program there. And so what's happening next? We're in pretty good shape. We're just gonna reach out to the ETIS community that goes beyond our newsletter, and provide them with the program and kind of the variables that are happening next. And then we're gonna host the webinar series. And then like we do typically is we post all of these presentations on our YouTube channel afterwards, within a week of the presentations. because we know, especially having these presentations the same time every day of the week, not everyone's going to be able to make it. So all these presentations will be available for free on our PNAMP YouTube channel. And that is it. Any questions?
I think you said this, but maybe I missed it. It's of course free, of course, I encourage everyone to come, but we are encouraging an RSVP to keep you in the information loop, right? But it's not required.
Yeah.
But it's helpful, right?
Yeah. So you can RSVP for all of the sessions through the PNAMP website. If you go to the ETIS event page, which Mari posted, there's the upcoming events is each of the sessions. And if you click on those events, you can click another button that either adds it to your calendar, which is nice. And then you can click on a button that says I'm going, which just gives me essentially your name and an email address, which you would have to fill out. And then the RSVP is useful for me because I can then send out reminders the day or two before each session for all those who are planning on going. And just another way to track kind of in kind. So that's useful.
And Sam, if a person can't attend a particular session, they'll be recorded for future viewing as in the past? Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
they're all being recorded and they'll all
You
be on
probably
our...
said that, and I'm sorry, I was thinking ahead.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's a good reminder though, because they will all be on our YouTube channel that PNAMP has.
That's awesome. Great.
We thank everybody on the planning committee. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's always good to more engagement with that. Anyone on the committee want to add something that Sam missed, or are there any questions? January 8th.
January 8th.
Don't miss it. And we will, of course, continue to remind you all of this in the PNAMP newsletter. Did we mention the PNAMP newsletter yet? We might even mention it in the CAP newsletter. Could. Why not?
You mentioned everywhere.
All right. All right. So thanks for that being flexible there, Sam. And Sam, you're up again because we did give you a break, but then we changed it up. So
No, this is good. So another collaborative project that Monitoring Resources and StreamNet have we are working on building these connections between the two programs. And I talked about this earlier when it was just the PNAMP overview of monitoring resources. But we dove into it quite a bit more this summer with this monitoring resources data connectivity and improvements analysis report. This was prepared by ESA, who used to be Sitka, if you guys are familiar. And it was the input from PNAMP, Pacific States, DFO Canada, and BPA over multiple meetings and sessions on making these connections between primarily StreamNet monitoring resources and SciFish more operative, a better connection in general. And so some of the things, and we came up with a huge list of items. I've just listed a few here that seem the most achievable, I guess, or some of them are achievable, but we need to dive into a bit more, are this restructuring of monitoring resources to better accommodate long trends. And we've had this conversation with the StreamNet tech team quite a bit. And this essentially is the idea of we have these long trends with lots of different funding agencies, and it's hard to track how their monitoring has developed through monitoring resources, the way that monitoring resources is currently set up. So there's some ideas on how we can make this how we can restructure monitoring resources to better show these long trends that have changing funding or gaps in funding and stuff like that. We've come up with some ideas on updating data collection events and monitoring resources. When you upload your data to StreamNet, you get a reminder, hey, it might be worth also updating your actual data collection events and monitoring resources as well. Because most of these StreamNet projects are documenting their metadata in monitoring resources, we just are looking for that connection and reminding them even that this is, you're doing it here, you might as well update and monitoring resources as well. Another story we've been talking about is adding focal species to monitoring resources. And this would be in our sample designer tool, where it'd be a drop-down list and you add a focal species. And there are focal species in SciFish right now. You can add, there's a list of focal species through in the council and through StreamNet, and there's a whole bunch of different places, and they don't really talk to each other right now, and they are in different formats. And so if we could do it in one place instead, that would be ideal. And monitoring resources seems like a pretty good spot for that. And then another big chunk of it, and I'm not going to talk about it too much here because it is the least, it's probably the furthest down the line, even though we've been working on it for a while, is utilizing artificial intelligence and machine learning to simplify the starting of metadata documentation. I talked about this a little bit before, but using these large language models to produce essentially like synthetic protocols that then someone can take this synthetic protocol, adapt it a little bit for their own program. And it's all based off of keywords and, you know, maybe a little bit of background information. It's pretty cool stuff, and we've seen it work, but it's still has, it's going to take some analysis still.
And then let me jump in before you go on, because the next topic's quite different. The large language model stuff came about from our friends at Canada DFO. When they got a look at monitoring resources, they said, can we have everything in there? And it, you know, this is amazing. Can we just have this? Can we? And we're sitting here thinking, for years we have been trying to get people to put stuff in there, and these guys are so excited about everything that's in there. It was a fascinating, different way to think about monitoring resources. And so, you know, because I mentioned they're a little behind us, right? They haven't really had a conversation about standardizing methods and documenting projects. Where do dollars go? What are the outcomes? And all the stuff in between, right? They're on the front end of that, and they're trying to be thoughtful about it. So they're excited about monitoring resources. They literally drew all the content out, and then Sam worked with them and said, let's narrow the content. Some of it is not as good as others. So we did admittedly kind of narrow down, sort of cherry pick content for them to pull out. And they, by applying the large language models, basically looking at the connectivity and repetition and whatnot and associations, they created basically, you know, rewritten protocols based off of multiple entries in the system. It's pretty fascinating. We can also see relationships between what's being monitored and how they're doing it. And it's pretty cool. And I'm trying to, and Jody just left. I'm trying to talk to Bonneville about linking this to some work Russ has started with, where do the dollars go, right? Which is of keen interest to some, and others are more interested in the science and the results and whatnot. And I think it's been kind of eye-opening to think about different ways that we can use the content in monitoringresources.org. That is not what we had intended, frankly. And that's usually scary in a science environment, right? You're supposed to do that. But it's really fascinating, and there is a lot of good work in there. Like I said, some of it is thinner than others, but there's also a lot of high quality documentation for projects. And the results of the projects are out there. If they're Bonneville funded, there's a report